It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Sarah returned home from a weekend getaway. As she turned onto her street, she felt a sense of calm wash over her until she pulled into her driveway. Her heart sank. The lush green lawn she had spent years nurturing was gone. In its place was a cold grey slab of concrete. Sarah stared in disbelief, her mind racing. What happened? Who did this? She stepped out of her car, her shoes crunching on the gravel, and walked closer, as if hoping it was some kind of optical illusion. But it was real. Her beautiful yard, once filled with vibrant grass and colorful flower beds, had been replaced with a sterile, lifeless expanse of concrete. Before she could process what had happened, Karen appeared, striding across the street, with her trademark clipboard in hand. "Ah, you're back," Karen said, her tone dripping with fake cheerfulness. "I see you've noticed the improvements." "Improvements?" Sarah exclaimed, her voice trembling with anger. "You destroyed my lawn. Who gave you the right to do this?" Karen smirked, unfazed. "As the head of the HOA, it's my duty to ensure our community remains modern and efficient. Grass is outdated, Sarah. Concrete is the future. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" Sarah shot back. "You had no right to touch my property. This is my home, not yours." Karen's expression hardened. "The HOA has every right," she said coldly. "According to the bylaws, we can make decisions that benefit the community as a whole. And since this was a community improvement, I used the HOA funds to cover the cost. Consider it a gift." Sarah was speechless. She had read the HOA bylaws when she moved in, and there was no clause that allowed the board to destroy private property without consent. This wasn't just an overreach, it was a blatant violation of her rights as a homeowner. "This isn't over," Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with determination. Karen shrugged. "Do what you want, but remember, I'm the one with the power here." As Karen walked away, Sarah pulled out her phone and began documenting the damage. She took photos of the concrete slab, the torn-up flower beds, and even the tire marks left by the construction equipment. She knew this was just the beginning of a battle she couldn't afford to lose. Later that evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through the HOA bylaws on her laptop. She knew Karen was manipulative, but she also knew that no one was above the law. As she read, she began to formulate a plan. The next morning, Sarah knocked on her neighbors' doors. To her surprise, many of them had similar stories. One neighbor had been forced to remove their beloved garden gnomes because Karen deemed them tacky. Another had been fined for having a bird feeder that attracted too many pigeons. It seemed Karen had been abusing her power for years, and everyone was too afraid to speak up. But Sarah wasn't afraid. She knew that if they stood together, they could hold Karen accountable. The news of Karen's unauthorized concrete improvements spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. What started as Sarah's personal battle quickly turned into a community-wide uprising. At least 10 families had returned home to find their lush green lawns replaced with cold grey concrete, all without their consent. The damage was devastating, destroyed irrigation systems. One neighbor, Mr. Thompson, had spent thousands of dollars installing a state-of-the-art sprinkler system. Now it was buried under layers of concrete, completely ruined, memorial flower beds erased, misses. Garcia, an elderly widow, had planted a rose garden in memory of her late husband. Karen's crew had bulldozed it without a second thought. Costly repairs. Estimates for restoring the lawns and fixing the damage ranged from $5,000 to $5,000 to $10,000 per household. The neighborhood was furious. Sarah decided it was time to take action. She organized an emergency community meeting at her house, and to her surprise, nearly every household showed up. The living room was packed, with people standing shoulder to shoulder, their faces a mix of anger and determination. "This isn't just about my lawn," Sarah began, her voice steady but passionate. "This is about our rights as homeowners." Karen and the HOA have gone too far, and if we don't stand up now, they'll keep trampling over us." The room erupted in agreement. One by one, neighbors shared their stories. "She fined me for having a pink flamingo in my yard. She threatened to report me for excessive bird feeding. She called the cops on my kids for playing too loudly." It was clear that Karen's reign of terror had gone unchecked for far too long. By the end of the meeting, the community had a plan. They pooled their resources to hire a lawyer, attorney Mark Reynolds, who specialized in property rights and HOA disputes. Mark was known for taking on tough cases and winning. Over the next few days, the neighborhood worked together to gather evidence. They compiled photos, videos, and written statements detailing Karen's abuses. Sarah even discovered that Karen had used HOA funds to pay for the concrete work without proper approval, a clear violation of financial regulations. With Mark's guidance, the community filed a lawsuit against the HOA and Karen personally. The lawsuit accused them of destruction of private property, misuse of HOA funds, emotional distress, and financial harm. The news hit Karen like a ton of bricks. For the first time, her smug confidence wavered. But she wasn't ready to back down. When the lawsuit papers arrived at Karen's doorstep, she was caught off guard. For a moment, her usual confidence wavered, and a flicker of panic crossed her face. But true to form, she quickly composed herself, clutching the papers tightly. As she muttered, "They have no idea who they're dealing with." Karen called an emergency HOA board meeting, determined to rally support. "This is nothing more than a baseless attack," she declared, slamming the lawsuit papers on the table. "The HOA has every right to make decisions for the betterment of the community. These people are just ungrateful." But this time, the board members weren't so quick to back her up. Some had grown uneasy with Karen's increasingly authoritarian behavior, and the lawsuit was the final straw. "Karen, this is serious," one board member said. "We can't just ignore a lawsuit. We need to consult our legal team." Karen scoffed. "Fine, let them waste their time and money. We'll win this easily." Meanwhile, the neighborhood wasn't stopping at just a lawsuit. Sarah and her neighbors filed a formal complaint with the local government, demanding an investigation into the HOA's practices. They provided detailed evidence of Karen's abuses, including photos, financial records, and testimonies from dozens of residents. What Karen didn't know was that this complaint would trigger a full-scale financial audit of the HOA. Investigators began combing through years of financial records, looking for any signs of mismanagement or fraud. It didn't take long for them to find something. Karen had been embezzling HOA funds for years. She had used the money to fund personal projects, including vacations, home renovations, and even a new car. The concrete improvements were just the tip of the iceberg. When the investigators confronted Karen with the evidence, her bravado finally cracked. "This is a misunderstanding," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I was just reinvesting in the community." But the numbers didn't lie. Karen had siphoned over $100,000 from the HOA's accounts, leaving the organization in financial disarray. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood, and the residents were outraged. "She stole from us," one neighbor shouted during a heated community meeting. "She destroyed our homes and took our money." Karen's reign of terror was crumbling, but she wasn't ready to give up just yet. The financial audit of the HOA was like opening Pandora's box. Investigators uncovered a trail of embezzlement and misuse of funds that left everyone stunned. Karen hadn't just been overstepping her authority. She had been stealing from the very community she claimed to serve. The evidence was damning. Luxury dinners. Karen had used HOA funds to pay for extravagant meals at high-end restaurants, often with no connection to HOA business. Receipts showed charges for filet mignon, lobster, and bottles of expensive wine. Personal vacations. She had booked trips to tropical resorts and European cities, disguising them as HOA conferences or community outreach. Home renovations. Karen's house had undergone significant upgrades, including a new kitchen, a swimming pool, and a landscape backyard, all paid for with HOA money. When the findings were presented to the HOA board, the members were horrified. "We had no idea," one board member said, shaking his head. "She told us everything was above board." Realizing the severity of the situation, the board called an emergency meeting. Karen, sensing the tide turning against her, tried to defend herself. "This is all a misunderstanding," she insisted, her voice trembling. "I was just trying to improve the community." But the board wasn't buying it. "You've put us all at risk," another member snapped. "We trusted you, and you betrayed that trust." In a unanimous vote, the board removed Karen from her position as head of the HOA. They also agreed to cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation, hoping to distance themselves from her crimes. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood, and the residents were both relieved and furious. "She stole from us," one neighbor shouted during a community meeting. "She destroyed our homes and took our money." Sarah, who had spearheaded the fight against Karen, felt a mix of vindication and sadness. "This was never just about the lawns," she told the crowd. "This was about standing up for what's right and holding people accountable." As the investigation continued, Karen's life began to unravel. Her once impeccable reputation was in tatters, and her neighbors, once too afraid to speak up, now openly shunned her. But the fight wasn't over yet. The community still had to deal with the fallout from Karen's actions and ensure that something like this could never happen again. Karen's downfall was swift and decisive. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and the authorities wasted no time in pressing charges. She was indicted for embezzlement, property destruction, and fraud, crimes that carried serious penalties, including potential jail time. When the police arrived at her house with an arrest warrant, Karen tried to put on a brave face. "This is ridiculous," she sneered, clutching her designer handbag. "I've done nothing wrong." But her defiance crumbled as the officers read her rights and handcuffed her. Neighbors gathered on their lawns, watching in stunned silence as Karen was led to the patrol car. Some whispered, others snapped photos, but no one felt sorry for her. As the car drove away, Sarah couldn't resist one final jab. "Maybe they'll let her pour concrete in the prison yard," she quipped, earning laughter and applause from the crowd. With Karen gone, the neighborhood began to heal. The HOA underwent a complete overhaul with new leadership elected by the residents. Financial transparency became a top priority, and regular audits were implemented to ensure no one could abuse their power again. The damaged lawns were restored, thanks to a settlement paid by the HOA's insurance. Sarah's once barren yard was now greener than ever, with vibrant flowers and a freshly installed irrigation system. The neighborhood looked better than it had in years. To celebrate their victory, the community threw a block party. Kids played on the newly restored lawns, neighbors shared stories and laughter, and for the first time in a long time, the atmosphere was filled with joy and unity. Sarah stood at the center of it all, surrounded by friends and neighbors who had become like family. "We did it," she said, raising a glass. "We stood up for what was right, and we took back our neighborhood." The crowd cheered, their voices echoing through the streets. It was a new beginning for everyone, a reminder that when people come together, they can overcome even the toughest challenges. As for Karen, she was eventually sentenced to several years in prison, her once privileged life reduced to a cautionary tale. The neighborhood moved on, stronger and more united than ever before. Life lessons from Karen's story. A message for all ages. Karen's story is more than just a tale of neighborhood drama. It's a powerful reminder of the importance of accountability, community, and standing up for what's right. At its core, this story teaches us that no one is above the law and that abuse of power will eventually lead to downfall. Karen's obsession with control and her willingness to exploit others for personal gain blinded her to the value of fairness and respect. And in the end, it cost her everything. For older audiences, this story resonates deeply because it reflects the wisdom of experience. Life has likely taught you that true leadership is not about wielding power, but about serving others with integrity and compassion. A community thrives when its members support one another, not when they tear each other down. Karen's failure to understand this led to her isolation, while the neighborhood's unity brought them peace and happiness. This story also reminds us that it's never too late to stand up against injustice. The neighbors who finally spoke out against Karen showed courage, proving that silence only empowers those who abuse their authority. Whether it's in a neighborhood, a workplace, or a family, addressing unfair behavior is essential to maintaining harmony. Another key lesson is the importance of transparency and accountability. Karen's embezzlement of HOA funds was only uncovered because the community demanded answers. This serves as a reminder that we must always question decisions that seem unfair or suspicious and hold those in power accountable for their actions. Lastly, Karen's story teaches us about resilience. Despite the challenges they faced, Sarah and her neighbors didn't give up. They worked together, gathered evidence, and fought for justice. Their perseverance paid off, and their victory is a testament to the power of unity and determination. Into life, we all have the power to choose how we treat others. Let Karen's story be a reminder to lead with kindness, to stand up for fairness, and to build communities where everyone feels welcome. After all, a life well lived isn't measured by how much control we have, but by the positive impact we leave on those around us.